we're going to be working our way through this preview, and if you know one thing about me, it's this. The previews always look eerily similar to what the quiz is going to look like. So if you would like to see an absolute walkthrough of the quiz, this would be it. I am going to be referencing my notes a lot, though, because I want you to be able to use those well as you're working through the quiz. So, let's jump in here. Again, if you like to use different colors like I do, I got some of those on the back table. We could roll with that too. All right, solve each system by accurately graphing each line and indicating the point of intersection. So, I put over on the sideboard to my left, but it's also here on your notes if you were copying things like we were before, what you've got to do when you've got two equations that are in slope-intercept form, y equals, and we're going to graph them. So my first job is going to be to plot the y-intercept. So here's y, here's x. My y-intercept is just that number on the end. So whatever it is, I go to the y-axis, I plot that. Then I go to the number in front of my x and start figuring these things out. And since I don't have room to do it while I'm here, again, those of you that are in class over there to my left, you can see that our slope is 2 or 2 over 1 because we always want it to be a fraction. And so, at least for this first one, I'll write down what, oops, oh my gosh, I'm almost doing bad things right off the bat. Some of you know that off the top of your head. Some of you might want to jot that down just to kind of get you thinking about it again. But our number on top is the up and down, once I got that straight in my head here. And my bottom number is left and right. So from here, I can go up 2 and right 1. Up 2 and right 1, and then I run out of room. But I still have half a graph left. I don't want to leave half a graph blank, especially if the crossing point ends up being there. So, if I want to keep going, how would I do that? Instead of up and right, what are the other two directions I could go? That's right. I can go down and left. I can do the opposite of both of these. So I could go down 2 and left 1. And I'm going to try and fill in as many dots as I can. Now at first you may seem like, okay, Hardy, that's overkill. Like I could have made this line back with 3 dots. I get it, but this is going to let me see, this is every possible intersection point. I see it now. So when I get to the second one, and I go, okay, start at -3 on y. Got it. Now I'm going to go up 1, positive, right 3, positive. Up 1, right 3. Up 1, right 3. I don't have an intersection point yet. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the first one. I'm going to go down 1 and left 3. Oh, bingo. Down 1 and left 3. There's my intersection point. So when I go to write the solution, when I go to write my coordinate point, basically all I'm doing now is saying, okay, back up to the x-axis, that's -3. Back over to the y-axis, that's -4. I just want the coordinate point. But I always got to do x then y. I've got to be careful of that. But that's all we're going to have to those. And so, as we kind of keep playing here, I start to look at the second one, and I'm like, wait a minute. Now, one's got x, one's got y, and it's just numbers. What the heck? But then I go looking, and again, if I have my notes done, I've got myself basically a carbon copy example, which says, hey, when it's x equals in just a number, it's an up and down line. So, I go to -4, I put a point, and I make a line. Okay, nothing else to have to do. It's not multiple steps, it's one step, I'm done. And then I go to y, and I'm like, ooh, y equals a number, just goes horizontally, side to side. So I go to where y is 3, I put me a dot. And I make a horizontal line. And I see my crossing point again. And just like we did on the last one, to get my point, again, x first, -4, y second, +3. The same two numbers I had here, and that's not a coincidence. So we're just basically going straight through there. One more straightforward one. We'll kind of let number 1 be our guide here. So I look at this and I go, okay, there's my number on the end, my y-intercept. What number's in front of x when I don't see one? What's that? 1. So my slope, since we like to be a fraction, would be 1/1. And like we saw either on our notes or on the sideboard, we're going to go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, get our dots. That's not many dots, though. So if I run out of room, again, I just do opposites of both of these. So I'm going to go down and left, down and left, down and left. And get myself situated. And then I play the same thing on the second one. Again, signs matter. There's my y-intercept, my number on the end. It's negative. Make sure they're on the y-axis. That's why they call it a y-intercept. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. The slope's the same. It's 1/1 again. Okay. Up 1, right 1. And so I'm going along here, and I'm like, well, they haven't crossed yet. Well, maybe if I do my opposites. So, again, down and left. And you're like, hang on. Party, they're not crossing at all. Okay, we've seen this before. There it is. If they have the same slope, they do, but a different y-intercept, they do, they never cross. They're parallel. So that is going to be no solution. They never cross. So that's the thing. And so then finally, I get over here to 4 and I have a different issue. I don't have y by itself yet. So my first job is to undo this plus 1x. So we're going to do that to each side. But when I go to write it over here, reminder, when we're in slope-intercept form, we always have the x part first. So I'm going to put the x part first, so I don't get that and the y-intercept mixed up. But now it's just what I've been doing for the last few problems. I get my number on the end. We do that first. Our slope this time, though, is negative. So here we're going to go down 1, right 1. The negative is not on both of these. It's just on this top number. So down and right. So down and right. Down. And as I have mentioned a few times before, if graphing gets the best of you sometimes, you always can go to y equals and type this in and just do second graph and pull up the, ooh, that's way too high numbers. Pull up the chart. There's 0, 3. There's 1, 2. There's 2, 1. And you can get all the points and just copy them from the chart. That's perfectly fine. Down and right, up and left. And I get that first line. Second one, I have a question. Y is not by itself yet. What's the one step to get y by itself in the second equation? What's the opposite of multiplying by 2? No, somebody knows. What's the opposite of multiplying by 2? Divide. And make sure it's every single term that gets divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So I go to negative 3, put my first dot, and then it's up and right. Up and right, up and there's a bingo. Down to x, 2, over to y, 1. So just straight graphing, seeing where they cross each other. And no, unfortunately, on the quiz itself, you will not have answers on the bottom of your page to check. Okay? That is just for the review purposes here. So a little bit of graphing to play with. Okay? Solving by substitution. Even though it says substation, it is not substation, it is substitution. So we have help here again. So if they're both y equals, and they are, we're just going to set the two equations equal. So step 1, set the two equations equal. So now we're back to first semester. Because the goal now becomes to get our x's together. And if I do a little quick fold over here, because now I got my example right next to me here. We got to get all the x's to one side. It does not matter which route you go, as long as it's an opposite. So if you minus 6x instead, you could. And it just becomes kind of a quick game. Opposite of minus 17. Oops, sorry about that. So I get my first solution, but I'm not done. But luckily, the not done part is going to be the easier part, which is taking one of your two equations here at the start. I'm just going to use the top one. And I'm going to start recopying this until I get to the x. But I know what the x is now. It's 4. And I can type that into my calculator. I can do it in my head, however I want to do it. And get my solution in a coordinate, x then y. But again, I've got the exact example here, if my notes are updated. Just saying. Or, what happens if I have one equation where x or y equals, but the other one's not? I can't set them equal, but I have an example, again, right on that same note page. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to plug it in for that y. So, step one. I start copying that second equation until I get to y. Then I'm going to replace it with what I put in that box. Everything else stays the same. Just the y comes out, the x plus 3 goes in. Because now I've only got one variable that I have to solve for. So I do my distributing just with the spot where the parentheses are at. And then it's important to take note, and again, why we have the example, don't do opposites with these x's. I don't want to do minus 2x minus 2x. They're on the same side of the equals. I'm just putting them together. Okay, I'm adding them. And now I'm into a regular two-step equation. Get my x alone, do the opposite. Took a while, but we got there. So there's my first variable, and then the same way that we did the first one, I'm going to go back to that y equals equation. And my last step is going to be to start copying this until I get to the x, and then I'm replacing it with the answer I just found. And even if on the quiz tomorrow, like you did this whole first step and then you forgot to do y, you're getting 2 out of the 3 points. So always make sure you're showing work so I can get you points in as much as you can, because there's always going to be ways to find some points if there's some parts that are good. Okay, so those are our 2 substitution ones. And then the last 2 are both going to be elimination. So we'll start with day 1, which is the easy ones, which are the ones that are set up nicely for us. Again, I can have my example right next to me here. So I look and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try and add down. 2 minus 2. There go the x's. Ooh, wait a minute. Negative and positive y. Zippo. 6 plus 5 is 11. You're like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. Oh yeah, everything canceled out. It was false, just like this is false. So since that's not true, it's going to be no solution. Now, if the 2 sides were equal, it would be infinite solutions, but 0 doesn't equal 11. That's not true. So we get that way. But again, they don't always all work out that way. So I go to this last one, and I'm like, okay, 8 and negative 8. 3 plus 1 is 4. Okay, so here's my notes one. Negative 13 plus 17 is positive 4. One-step equation, we like that. So I've got my y already. That's set. Okay, now to get the second part, I always have been going with the top equation. I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going to start copying this until I get to the y, because I know what y is. It's 1. Oops, and I am off the screen. Let's get back on. Multiply those together. Undo my plus 3 with an opposite. And then this is the one where I got to be a little bit cautious. Because again, I'm not subtracting 8 from x, I'm multiplying it. The minus isn't in the middle. So we've got to divide there. And again, x always comes first, then y. But again, you keep noticing I've got exact examples to work with if I've got those notes. I've got a step-by-step to help me through. So we got one left. I think we got one left. We got one left. Solving by systems, day 2. The harder ones. All right, we got this. Do one more fold here. Now this time if I try to add down, I get 4x and I get negative 1y. Nothing cancels. So these are the ones where I've got to look and say, okay, can I multiply 2 by something and get to 6? What? 3. So I'm going to multiply my top equation by 3. Everything, not just the 2x. You're like, okay, so why did you do 3? Because the goal is to get to a point where this works like the last 2 problems that we did. So on the last 2 problems we did, when I got to this first step and I added down, a variable went away. At least one did. So now that I multiplied this by 3 to make it negative 6 and positive 6 cancel. 12 plus negative 5 is 7. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. This does not mean it's no solution, because I still can go in here. You can divide 0 by a number. There's still a variable there. So actually, that was my step 1. That would be my step 2. But I still need to know what x is. So my last step, my step 3, I'm going to take that top equation and I'm going to start copying it until I get to the y, because I know what y is. Everything else in that equation stayed the same, except the y got replaced with the 0. 4 times 0 is 0. Adding 0 doesn't do nothing, so we'll just kind of ignore it once we get it in there. And I do I1. Final step. To get that value. Basically, what you're looking at here is the quiz. Okay? So if you haven't, one of the following, if you haven't, just a second here. Okay, classroom, again, right at the top of the stream. If you are missing any of the notes, they're all here. If you need a note packet, they're in the back. So those will be there. This video will be posted shortly as well if you need to go back and look at something. But just make sure that you're working through this, because if not, this